I've created a second enemy for the game. I'll just run through some of its assets and what I've done with the code. So I've created a couple more sprites. So there's the actual enemy itself. It's got this diamond shaped mask. It's got a centered point of origin, and it's just a 2-frame animation with these sort of flashing wings. Close that down. I've also made enemy laser sprite 2. So this is another type of projectile. It's got a slightly larger mass than the other ones because this projectile is just going to fly across the screen in a straight line. So I thought I'd sort of balance that out by having a bigger collision mask with that. And again, it's just a 2-stage animation, just this kind of flashing glow effect. And the origin is centered. I've also imported a new sound, Zap3, and that's for the enemy projectile. And if we go into the system object, I've now got alarm 1, which is spawn enemy 2. So when its alarm goes off, it spawns an enemy off screen at a randomized Y coordinate, just one enemy this time. And then it's got the alarm reset to a random range of 20 to 80 frames. I've also got the alarm 1 initiated by this alarm set 60, so it will happen 30 frames after the first wave of enemies appear, the enemy number 1. Let's close this down so you can see it. If you take a look at the enemy 2 object, I mean, it's pretty much set up the same as enemy 1. If you look at the create event in here, so when it's created, it will move across the screen horizontally at a speed of 8. It's a minus value, so it moves from right to left. It has a shoot alarm initiated at 20 frames, and it has this other alarm, second alarm, set to 20. And that second alarm, alarm 1, has a randomized function on the movement. So it's randomized, and then the function v speed, which is the vertical speed, is set to a choose function, and this is like a random generator basically. But the way it works is you can have a number of arguments here that are the variables, and then it will choose from those arguments a variable. So it can either go straight ahead, or it can start moving up, or we can start moving down at a speed of 5. And then it's got an alarm is reset that randomizes the movement to 30 to 60 frames. So this makes it so that as it flies across the screen randomly, it'll either move up or down. The choose function is really interesting, and you can use it in lots of ways. And we could put this choose function in lots of the kind of bits of code and create something that's very dynamic. So it's a useful bit of code to know. Let's close that down. If we go into the step event, we've got the leave screen code there. So if it goes off the left of the screen, it gets destroyed. I've also set limits on the Y axis movement of enemy 2 in the same way we did with the player limit movement, so it won't go off the top or the bottom of the screen. Then I've got the laser collision with the player laser. So if it's shot by the player, it changes the instance to explosion 1, the same as the enemy 1 object, and again the global points is increased by 1. So let's have a look at the enemy laser 2 object. So when it's created, it's got a horizontal speed of -20, so it's pretty fast. Again, it's set up so if the player exists, to prevent that bug of it shooting whilst the player is destroyed. And it's playing the audio sound Zap3. In a step event, it's destroyed if it leaves the room. and if it collides with the player, it destroys the instance of that laser. So to make that work with the damage system, we need to also set a collision with enemy laser 2, and it's set up exactly the same way. So in hit, the global shield variable is -25, or we could change that. The thing about sort of Game Maker and creating something like this is the more complex it becomes, the more variables you have to play with. So it might be set up like this, but then once you've been sort of play testing it, you'll want to change and tweak these values depending on its sort of playability. It might be that we want to reduce the damage or increase the damage that this laser 2 does. I've also added some feedback to the player object when it gets shot. If I look at the sprite and edit sprite, so I've created this 2-frame animation, so this flashing kind of shield effect. Okay. And what I've done in the player object is on the enemy lasers, I've set the image speed, which is a function that sets the speed of the animation that we looked at earlier, to 1, so it'll flash. Then I've set an alarm 0 to 10, and I'm also playing a new sound called deflect. So when the enemy laser hits the player, it'll flash and you'll get this sound. So to stop it sort of flashing all the time, in the create event, I've set the image speed to nothing. That means it won't animate at all, it'll just be static. And so to stop it once it gets hit, to continue flashing, I've set this alarm, which resets the animation. So the image speed is nothing, it stops animating, and the image index, which is the subframe, is set to 0, which is the first frame that doesn't have the kind of flashing effect on it. I've also tweaked a few other things so that when it collides with the enemy 1 and enemy 2, it does the same as the laser collisions. I've just adjusted it slightly, so instead of being 25 damage, it does 50 damage. And I've done the same with the enemies as well. So I've duplicated the shot by player on the collision with the laser to the player object. So basically when they come in contact, the player and an enemy, then the player will lose 50% of its shield, and the enemy player will just blow up. The enemy sprite, sorry, will just blow up. Okay. I've also added some music. So in my sounds, I've got music now. Let's just open it up. It's a whole track. So I've set it to compressed and stream off the disk. Okay. And in my system object, in the create event, I've added play music code. So play music, and the loop is set to true. Okay, so let's test that out.